Hey everybody, this is Perch, and hold the phone a second. The Image Union has more news than just Jim Valentino apparently taking the names off of a book. The story still seems weird. I'm just gonna throw that out there. It was a weird story, weird timing. There's definitely more to that story than just what we were led to, what initially came out. And getting to the answers of what that is actually pretty important. I've seen a couple news sites report on it, but they're doing nothing than just kind of repeating the tweet saying these people's names were taken out of a book. Well, there could be some implications to that on a number of different fronts, both for the company and for the workers for this union and other things. There's definitely a second step, and this is where good comics journalism would chase that story a little bit, because it's curious. Or the person who posted it is a raving maniac. But let's assume for the moment that the person who initially reported on this is not insane, and that there is some more to it. So hopefully people do. But a couple days ago, I posted a video, "How's it going?" And it was about this story, which just seemed like a cluster. And I made a bunch of points in that video about kind of the weird process that this took. And as we get into the next part of the story, which is there's actually very big movement and news, sort of, in this whole union process, I still stand by something I said, and I think it's key to how all this is going to unfold, which is the Image Union took a extremely aggressive approach from the get-go. They announced this on social media. A bunch of people at Image did not have a heads up that it was coming, and or at least they claim that. Now again, I'm not first party there, but I've heard from first parties who say they were blindsided by this Twitter announcement. Why would you announce the formation of a union, particularly using the words historic and reaching out to a lot of contributors? Again, when people write articles for several of these sites like Vice, like Motherboard, like Gizmodo, like Forbes even, there's a difference between regular staff writers and contributors. Contributors, pretty easy to become a contributor, actually, and it's not as indicative of of support. These sites all need clicks. They need as much content as possible. We're in a content war kind of world. So, but a bunch of articles went out, kind of all saying the same thing. And that's another theme you're about to see here. But by going to Twitter first and basically saying we're announcing a union, it basically, I'll say, forced the hand. And it's a common, union approach. It's this never been done before here. One of the ways, when the workers feel like they're going to be in for a fight, like the company's not going to accept it, they frequently take this route. In comic books, it makes sense that they would take this route because a number of creators, a number of people who are on Twitter, much of the power and the gravity around a lot of these stories happens via Twitter in comics. I think it's one of the things that's very wrong in comics. Every now and then, was it "you murdered this guy," I think, comes into the comments like, "Stop talking about Twitter, it hurts your channel." Well, sure, except Twitter is a driving force in comics right now, even if it's not a driving financial force in comics right now. A lot of the decisions, a lot of the company movement is informed first and foremost by Twitter, and that's absolutely broken, but it also is what it is. So, but anyway, it came off aggressive out the gate. So what has happened? Well, the Image comic workers voted, and basically 7-2 voted in favor of unionizing, and basically forming a real union. Now, there's a lot of confusion about what this means. And to understand, you have to actually understand a little bit about how unions work. So, at its very briefest kind of 30-second explanation, what happens is when a group of workers wants to form a union, they basically state their intent. In many cases, they can partner up with other unions, or basically get guidance from how this could work. And the NLRB and some of the other union associations were attached to the Comic Workers Union, so they were getting advice on how to do this and how to structure it, properly. They were being led along the way. We knew that. That's not a big revelation. And when you express your intent to form a union, the company has an option to either voluntarily accept a union or to, basically do nothing, reject it, and hope it goes away. At that moment, things get dodgy for companies when they're trying to prevent a union because there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of lawsuits and there's a lot of legal things that can take place around what employers, meaning management, can and can't do. So, and this is really key to this story. There's also a game plan. So, typically speaking, when a group of people says we want to form a union, it's very common for the company to do nothing. Their first statement is to say we understand people want to form a union, and leave it at that. Basically, then they turn the process over to their lawyers. And the reason being is companies can inadvertently legitimize the union without a vote accidentally. Even if they say, well, you want to form a union? Okay, well, why don't you come in the office and let's talk about that? And if the union goes in as a collective, as a group, and the management basically has this conversation, then legally they've acknowledged that a union exists. A union suddenly pops up just by nature of having that meeting. That's why the steps are very, very careful that a company has to take to basically navigate this process. I'll give you this story, and it's a published case study that a lot of people have seen, which basically the president of a small non-union manufacturing company in Pennsylvania faced a problem. A union organizer was in his office demanding that the company recognize the union. In this case, similar things happening with Image. It's just instead of in the office, they took to Twitter and they said, we demand a union. And they encouraged a lot of creators to retweet and support and give a lot of, and the company behind it, the union that was sitting behind the comic book workers union, was also doing its best to get the word out, put PR, get articles written, everything else. Because as you've seen, when you look at the articles, they're all almost exactly the same. They use the same words. Even though the article writer is different, they're using the exact same language for each step. The initial formation of the union, saying that Image has rejected, which we'll get to in a minute, and then that this union, the newest story, that this union vote was successful. So anyway, back to the story. To prove that a majority of the company's workers supported the union, the organizer offered a stack of authorization cards. And after carefully examining them, the president conceded that most employees had signed a card, and he agreed to meet with union representatives in a few days to negotiate a contract. Much to his chagrin, the company's president later learned that he had inadvertently unionized his company. Under federal law, an employer must recognize a union chosen by a majority of companies in a bargaining unit. That is, the employer must acknowledge that the union is exclusively bargaining agent for all employees who will be covered by the collective bargaining agreements who are eligible to vote on union representation. Ordinarily, the employer is not required to recognize the union until it has won a secret ballot election conducted by the National Labor Relations Board. But the company may, if it wishes, extend recognition voluntarily in response to a demand by a union supported by a majority of the employees. All right, what does all that mean? It means that typically when employees come in and say, we want a union, the employer, the manager, has to be careful about their next steps if they want to argue it, or if they want to, if they want something different that's being proposed at any level, they need to let it play out. This is what many companies do. It's not a sign that the management hates unions or hates people or is against it. It means that they want it to take its legal process rather than inadvertently stepping into a union. And that's important. Now, unions know this, but a lot of people on Twitter do not. And a lot of the way that language happens also does not. So what happened was Image issued a press statement basically acknowledging that was happening and hunkered down, waited for the process to play out. What then happened was a number of articles got written saying that Image Comics won't voluntarily recognize workers' new union. They all hit on November 5th. They all have almost the exact same language. Again, even though they're written by completely different people, you go from Gizmodo to Vice to Motherboard to other places, and you'll see the exact same words. And the words basically portray Image Comics as being reluctant, angry, trying to. The Image is basically portrayed as being really hostile to this. Even through the language, though Image was initially reluctant to comment on CBWUs, that's a union, formation and whether it would recognize it. The company has subsequently said that it will always believe in the fair, equitable treatment of staff and to strive to support employees. That statement was written by a lawyer to the best of its abilities. And then they all have the same exact sentence. The most straightforward and immediate step Image could take to support its employees in their decision to become a union shop would be to simply acknowledge the union and start communicating in good faith with the bargaining community. That is a tactic. If you look at that exact same sentence, almost that exact same sentence, you can see it not just for Image, but for almost any company where this goes down. The goal here is to pressure the company into accepting the union. They know, because they're not idiots, that the majority of companies won't do this and will require go to a vote. This is all about trying to leverage early power in the relationship, and that's basically what happened. So there you go. They did. Image basically stated, and it's weird how this stuff is written, because it's all written as if Image is dodgy. Now you might say, oh, it sounds like, Perch, you're siding with Image here. No, I'm not, but I am siding with kind of basic fairness in communication. And these are all very slanted articles designed to do one thing, which is portray the workers as noble, trying to formulate a union, and Image as being kind of this old dodgy company dragging their feet, not wanting to accept it. That's the point of all this. So sure enough, they do a secret ballot, and the results of that generated a new host of articles and a series of tweets. I still maintain, and I say this as somebody who's seen a number of legal cases about unions, if you do a lot of your business on Twitter, you're opening yourself up to legal challenges. Now, I don't think Image will do that, because I think that the gambit that has been played is that they've got a lot of creators to retweet, and they basically have set it up as workers good, company bad. So if the company then decides to legally challenge some of the things that have done, even though technically there were some rules broken, including, if you're really, really picky about it, some of the statements around the secret vote could be construed as an encouragement of a particular outcome of that vote, which is against the rules. Legally, it is. You're not supposed to do that on company time, and some of those posts went out, right past company time. However, Image being a global company, I've seen other companies get hosed by this. That's all I'm saying. That said, again, I don't think Image is going to pursue it, because it would be construed as them being even more evil. So there you have it. So the articles that got written basically all, again, repeated the same exact things. And they all have the exact same sentence. After management failed to voluntarily recognize the union, Image workers have won an NLRB election to become the first unionized comic company. Now that's a misstatement on a couple things. First off, after management failed to voluntarily recognize the union, except what Image did do is enter into the process with the NLRB. So that's a very slanted way of saying it. It then said Image workers have won the election to become the first unionized comics company. That's also a misnomer, because this is going to cover FTEs at Image, of which there are not very many. And it's also not going to cover any independent contractors. I'm seeing a lot of artists going, yes, finally, representation. No, sorry, you won nothing. You get nothing. This is purely for the office workers. And this also doesn't mean that the demands of that group have been accepted. All it means is that the union has formed, they have their list of demands, and they can now, if they choose to, and they will, enter into bargaining, collective bargaining, and union representation to push these ideas forward. As much has been said about their last demand, which is to basically allow a committee to pick and choose what content gets published, largely as a result of Rock Up Church and Warren Ellis and those situations that went on there. As I said before, there's zero chance that demand is going to be acknowledged. Image, the management, knows that that would void a number of their contracts, cause a lot of problems. They're going to fight that. Now, they might try and give some kind of token, we'll put together some kind of committee, if they're smart, and that is a huge question in all this. But if Image is smart, they can use their lawyers to basically say, we'll give you a voice in expressing your displeasure, and we'll give you a formal way to maybe ask to be taken off a title, everything else, but they're not going to allow the creative control of what gets published to be handed off to their workers. They can't physically, legally do that. It would be the end of them as a company. And that's not me being try to be over the top. It would violate a number of their contracts. There are a lot of people who currently work with Image that would leave, who have said they will leave. I've talked to directly, and I know others have as well. That would be a problem, in part because they just disagree. A lot of the reasons why people came to Image is to avoid editorial interference, be able to tell the stories they want to tell. And so this is it's funny because a lot of these articles get written of, you would think a union would be, right in line with Image's ideals. Well, people who say that, I don't think really understand how Image was formed. It's because many parts of what's being proposed are the exact opposite of why Image was formed. But again, it's not my party. Image can do what they want. The workers can do what they want. Have at it. So this election happens. It also notes this other part that 3 votes are being contested, which is, I imagine that's because the 3 votes in question are by people who no longer work there, but who knows? That's just another weird curveball in all this. But what happens now? Well, like I said, there will be some kind of collective bargaining that will take place between the union representative and the group. Not everything on that list is going to get accepted. That last item for sure is not going to get accepted. Several other items on the list will, and then that will be fine. The workers in this place will start paying dues to the union and have to put money in there. Maybe Eric Stevenson and some of the Image management starts to tighten up some of their policies and procedures because, for all the people who are against unions and everything else, you do have to understand that Image's management has been batshit insane at different times. And so in many cases opened themselves up to this. We can argue about the values of the union all we want, but prior to all this going on, it's not like Image management had this stellar reputation for running a clean and well-organized shop and treating all employees, when I say fairly, I mean consistently. One of the big complaints around Image is that one employee would get radically different treatment than another employee. And in my book, that is unfair. And I hate it. I like consistency. If you've been listening to this channel for any length of time, good policy or bad policy, I do expect people to be consistent. That's fair. That's one of the reasons why that last item on their demands about being able to gatekeep certain creators out of comics is unfair, but be that as it may. Image got themselves into this situation. It's not surprising that it occurred. The workers, as I said in the earlier video, and I still maintain, do not completely understand what they have done. There's going to be some GoFundMes that will now be created in order to kind of pay dues and other things. And Image is now going to have to struggle with it. The question is of how much Image will struggle with it is really going to be based around, how long will it take for Image to snap to a more professional management system where they have consistent rules that they follow. Right now, that has been a mess. And with the personalities involved, I think it's going to continue to be a mess. It's not like Todd McFarlane sits there and writes all these rules. He's he's at the top. It's that next level of management that tends to F this stuff up. It's things like a lot of the gossip that goes on around some of what Eric Stevenson gets up to after hours in the town of Portland. That kind of stuff is going to be hard to rectify. So, you have a company that's been run, relatively sloppy in certain areas. This situation is going to exacerbate that, and you're going to see a little battle take place. Now, I'll get all the way back to where I began. The Jim Valentino taking the names out of a book is guaranteed to cause more issues. If that is true, and that is linked, and that is retaliation for all this, that is an insane move during all of these things that go on. And it's just going to make all this whole thing messier. Now, by the way, some people in the comments, and you may be thinking right now, well, why doesn't Image just fire all these people? Yeah, they can. And that's a definite, possible outcome to all of this. And that is precisely why the Image Union, the people involved, went to Twitter and worked so aggressively hard to get a lot of creators on board with it. We had this news announcement, a day or two ago, Jeff Lemire is going to be exclusive to Image. Well, guaranteed people are in Lemire's ear right now telling him to support the union and basically threatening him behind the scenes if he doesn't. Do you think the last couple of years about who you follow on Twitter and that kind of stuff has been bad? It's about to get a lot worse for everyone surrounding Image. Creators are going to be hard pressured to support the union for one exact reason. All the people involved in this union are easily replaceable. And by the way, that's not a knock. Some of these people may be very skilled. However, their talents are, there's plenty of groups out there, plenty of employees who would love those jobs. And they are easy to train up on. People are going to take that as an insult to those people. I don't know I know two of the people. I've talked to one of them. I don't know how skilled these people are. Maybe they're just amazing at their jobs, but the job itself can be filled by a number of different people. So you might say, well, why doesn't Image just go do that? Well, they can, and they may. However, it is going to be a huge now battle with creators who are going to say, I refuse to go to Image. Now, here's where the game gets a little bit interesting, because a lot of creators can certainly now go somewhere else if they don't like the way Image treats it. But Image is in a terrible position. So also are the creators. There are not just endless companies out there that they can go to. I mean, you can wander over to IDW. Maybe IDW is hoping that they'll pick up some people, but IDW is on amazing financial footing. Boom is trying to get sold. You're going to go to Black Mask? You're going to go to Aftershock? Like, where are you going to go? You're going to go to Valiant? Like, there's just not a lot of options. So creators can say, I refuse, I reject, but, where are you going to go? You can go to Marvel and DC, and Marvel and DC are going to say, oh, look at all this influx of talent. Let's cut some rates, and they will. So, that's not a great outcome. But it's also a bad outcome for Image, because they're now stuck with, they have a number of creators who are not going to agree with the union, but be quiet about it, and some of those creators are their bigger selling ones. They're going to have a huge issue with this, particularly if anything even remotely comes close to this gatekeeping thing that the union's proposing. They're going to leave. Now, where will they go? Well, they're the bigger name creators. They're going to be able to wander over to Dark Horse or IDW and basically write their own deal. Meanwhile, so Image has a chance of losing those people, and they also have a chance of losing the Twitter crowd, who basically says you're not supporting the union enough. So who's the big loser in this? Probably Image. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Anyway, sorry for the longer video, but that's what's going on. So there is a union. Now you might, one other point. When the vote happens, does Image have to acknowledge it? Yes. Yes, they do. Unlike before, now that there's been a vote, now that they've got formal representation, yeah, Image now has to go down the path of basically bargaining and acknowledging that this thing exists. They no longer have the option of saying it doesn't. So yes, there is a comic book union for full-time employees at Image. Do I think this is going to start a revolution across all comics? Nope. I say that for one reason. If you're Marvel or DC, there's no way in hell you're going down this path. And cracking that nut is going to be impossible. If you're one of the smaller companies, you're Boom, IDW, Dark Horse, Valiant, etc. Sure, a union can get started there, but frankly, what would be the point? There's just not a lot of people that we're talking. I mean, this is a very small group. And in a lot of cases, if these companies are even relatively smart, they'll start some conversations now. Now, legally, they can't say, hey, let's avoid a union. Tell me what you want. That actually is, that's not legal either. But they can reach out and say, hey, let's make sure we're doing what you're, I mean, again, Aftershock, Black Mask, a lot of those kind of studios, they're already engaging with the employees in this way. And they don't have many. I mean, we're not talking about, 40, 50 people. In some cases, we're talking about like 3 or 4. And it's, it's hard to imagine this sweeping all of comics. But, you're probably going to hear a lot about that over the next couple days. So anyway, there you go. There's some information for you. Do with it what you will. And what a crazy time. Hope everybody has a happy weekend, and thanks for listening.